So we left off talking about that when working with rational expressions, that we have to be careful on identifying restrictive values. There are certain values that we cannot have for b because this would make the whole problem undefined. When the whole problem is undefined, we can't work with it. So we have to disclose what values that you can use and not use. So one of the first questions that we're going to ask you on the 5th unit test is identify the restrictive values. Basically what you're doing is finding values that make this expression undefined. What you're going to do is focus on just the denominator, the bottom of the fraction. So you're going to factor out the denominator completely. You might be saying, well, why aren't you focusing on the top? Because, again, if you recall, any number on top divided by 0 will make the whole problem undefined. So it's not so much whatever on top makes it 0, it's focusing on the denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to, step 1, factor the denominator completely. So again, we're ignoring the top, the numerator, focus on the bottom. So if we had b squared minus 4, remember, how to factor anything completely is 1. See if there is a GCF. No. Remember, there's 4 types of GCFs. Do we have matching parentheses? Do we have the same letter? Do we have the same number? Do we start with a minus sign? No to each of those questions, so there's no GCF. Then we always count how many terms are left over. 1, 2. 2 terms means difference of squares. Let's see if we can do this as difference of squares. Do we have a minus sign between the two? Yes. Do we have a perfect square? Yes. And yes. So we can factor this out. Remember how to factor out difference of squares? We need to have 1 plus, 1 minus. Always different signs. So you really need to be good at your factoring skills. I hate to say this, the next unit, Unit 5, is all about your factoring skills. If you're not good at knowing how to factor out difference of squares, you're going to struggle, so you might want to keep on reviewing those notes that we have up online for Chapter 6. So we have 1 plus, 1 minus. That was step 1. Then we're going to do the square root of b squared. So b, and they go in the first 2 spots. And then 4 is 2 and 2. Now that you factor out the denominator, step 2 says you're going to solve for the variable. This is basically what we learned in section 6.7, where we're going to take each of these parentheses, each binomial, and set it to equal 0. That way, when we do this, we can solve for the variable. Move the 2 over because we want the letter by itself. And this is how we get b equals -2. And add 2 to both sides here, and we get b equals +2. So we knew that we were going to have 2 answers because squared. And these 2 values would make this undefined. If I plugged in a 2 here, 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Doesn't matter that this would be a 3 on top. 3 divided by 0 is undefined. Or if you plugged in a -2 in here, -2 times -2, remember squared means multiply it twice. -2 times -2 is +4. +4 minus 4 is still 0. Doesn't matter that this will give you a -17. As long as this is 0 at the bottom, it's undefined. So basically, if you had this as a rational expression, you would have to say b cannot equal -2 or 2. Those 2 numbers would make this undefined. So that's what we mean by identify the restrictive values. B cannot be -2 or 2 because it would make this undefined.